Elseworlds or main continuity. I think there are some fantastic content to come out from both sides of this storytelling. About 7 to 8 months ago, I made a video called Does DC Comics Have a Continuity Problem? Where we looked at some of the issues that modern day comics might struggle with. Also around that same time period, when my channel was a little bit smaller than what it is now, I put up a poll of what do people prefer to read, the main continuity or DC Elseworlds. I had around 2,000 votes. And the difference was pretty staggering. It was 72% for main continuity and 28% for Elseworlds. Now, even though I have more subscribers today, if I were to do this poll again, I still think main continuity would win out because I think for a big majority of fans, they like the idea of storylines that have a beginning. Everyone is interconnected with one another. All the stories take place in the same world and the universe just keeps on continuing. In all transparency, I flat out prefer Elseworlds far more than the main continuity. Recently, I have reread some New 52 stories, some stories in Rebirth, and some new Elseworld stories that I haven't been able to get around to recently, and it really opened my eyes to how much I just can't get on board with the new continuity or the continuity in general nowadays. Now, when we look at a main continuity, I am basing this off of the idea that there is only one, because truthfully, well, there is. Prime Earth, the main continuity of DC Comics. That is the continuity that everyone is going to be focusing on. Any other DC universe that is made out there, I don't care if it's the DCEU, if it is Zack Snyder's world, if it is the world James Gunn is going to be building, if it is the DC animated universe, it does not matter. All of those worlds are Elseworlds. First of all, with main continuity, I think there is way too much to keep up with, and one of the biggest problems is you might find certain characters much more interesting than other characters, but if you perhaps don't read those characters or the team-ups and groups that those characters take place in, down the line in separate issues, different runs, different storylines, there's going to be information that props up that you're simply going to be like, when the hell did this happen? What are they talking about? What's going on? Now, in all fairness, when I was younger, I loved the pre-New 52 era. I loved the modern age of comics, and more or less I could actually really keep up with every storyline they did. And there's two things here that I don't necessarily have the answer for you. One, maybe that continuity was much more structured than the continuities are today. Or two, perhaps being younger in your early, mid, late teenage years, maybe even being a younger adult. And I'm not saying I'm an old adult, I'm 28 years old, but perhaps when you are that young, you have an easier time digesting the main continuity and every single detail behind it. Now, 100%, I'm sure the main continuity has found ways to ensure that if you are not interested in something, you don't necessarily need to put any mind to it, any attention to it if you really don't want to. But overall, I do find the main continuity to be a little too hard to digest. The other problem I think the main continuity might have is not just with the amount of storylines going on, but it's also the amount of writers they probably have in one room trying to craft out an entire universe that truly will never have an end. There are so many ideas that are being played out at one time. An Elseworld story is kept singular, or maybe even 2 or 3 writers max. It's a smaller group of people who want to tell an original story. And original stories is what I especially love. I do find a lot of the times that the main continuity loses its originality in a lot of ways, because a lot of what happens in the main continuity is just a reformation or almost a reskin of what you have already read time and time again. I also feel that the consequences and the stakes of main continuity timelines always loses its flair and its emotion as time goes on. When you try to give a lot of these heroes consequences, which is honestly who we're watching it for, at the end of the day, a lot of the hardships you end up putting them through pretty much end up getting resolved anyways. One of the big things, if you try to kill some of these bigger name characters, they always end up returning. It doesn't even really matter in the end. Now, there is an exception. There are a couple of characters they have killed over time that have stayed dead, and I even believe currently right now Alfred is still dead at the moment, which is huge because he's such a prominent member of the Bat family. Even I did not think they would keep him dead for long. And I personally give them credit for having such a prominent character in Alfred dead for so long, but I think one of the biggest reasons why they don't take those risks and why they don't keep some of these most important or very popular characters dead and gone for a long time is because we have become so used to reading these stories over the course of 80 years of history. When you do get rid of them, after a while, those stories might lose its flair, and it doesn't feel the same not having some of those very important main characters or supporting characters driving the story in certain directions. And that's why perhaps killing characters does not always work, but I do appreciate the attempt in doing it, and I absolutely appreciate in the case of Alfred or even say Ted Kord Blue Beetle, they actually keep it in effect for as long as they possibly can. To continue what feels to be the obsolete nature of true consequences and stakes is the fact that in a lot of continuity storylines, the ridiculous power-ups they give to characters and the fast-paced nature of these stories in general, it's too much sometimes. I swear in recent comic book storytelling, it always seems to be that there is a new threat that rises that they've never seen before in their history of being superheroes, and they have some sort of ability or power output that they don't know if they're going to be able to stop it, no matter how ridiculously powerful characters like Superman or Wonder Woman or the rest of the Justice League are. And it always just happens to be that in some of the last issues of this run, they miraculously find a way to defeat a villain, just so that after they defeat this villain in the next couple of issues, another villain who's more powerful than that previous villain is now an immediate threat to them, and they don't know if they're going to be able to stop that villain. A lot of the main continuity storylines I read from New 52 and even some of the ones that have happened in Rebirth, I sat here and really thought to myself, why should I be worried at all on what's going to happen? Perhaps that is what happens when you have over 80 years of comic book storytelling. You've built these worlds to always have the heroes, well, save the day. You can't really change from that method. Another huge problem with the continuity is how much they focus on the multiverse. I can't handle it. I think it is way too much. Things get far too confusing. And as much as I do enjoy the idea of the multiverse and maybe sporadically using it here and there, it almost feels as if all their threats have to do with the multiverse. It's all about changing certain continuities and certain decisions that have been made in the past that they don't want quote unquote canon anymore. There is too much reliability on the multiverse. That's definitely one thing I have to give Marvel over DC. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of the Marvel universe. I'm sure there is somewhere out there where they've tried to retcon certain things that have happened in history, but from how I understand it, Marvel has never had a reboot. DC has had about 7 or 8 reboots. And the crazy thing is about 3 or 4 of those reboots have only happened within the past 15 years. And now that finally leads me into the reasons on why I like Elseworlds stories. And granted, I'll even be honest here, I have way more points as to why I don't like the main continuity compared to the amount of points that I like Elseworlds. I think it's because, in all fairness, I've found so many things to nitpick about the main continuity. Perhaps I'm not being completely fair in certain aspects, but with Elseworlds, there's less points to make because it's just simple. It's simple on what they're trying to go for when they make these original standalone stories. It somewhat goes back to a point I made a couple minutes ago with how much history we have of DC Comics. You have already read these characters so many times to know roughly who they are and how they are going to be depicted in a main continuity. And that's why with Elseworlds, it's so great to have the freedom to do whatever you want. All your creative choices are yours. You can change these characters as much as you can, all while at the same time trying to find the sweet spot to know that when you are reading or watching or whatever you're doing, you know that that is Batman, that is Superman, that is the Flash. But it's different enough so that people know, oh, this isn't just your ordinary Batman that we always seem to see every single comic book I read. There is going to be a tweak to the character that's going to make him feel different in certain mentalities or attitudes or personalities, or even the way he fights as Batman. Maybe he's a lot more reserved. Maybe he's a lot more brutal. Maybe this one isn't afraid to make certain decisions. With 80 years of history, I know who Batman is. I know who Green Lantern is. I know who Wonder Woman is to the core. But Elseworlds is giving you a look, a window into other ideas and storylines in which you might even like those versions of the character better than the main continuity, and I love that. And with that is the fact that stories can develop and expand in any way you want them to. Elseworlds can usually be solidified to the fact that if I'm going to make a story on the Flash, it's just going to be about the Flash. The outside world might exist, I might reference it, I might Easter egg it, but I'm not going to really dive into it. But you might have Elseworld continuities where everyone is coming together, everyone does have interconnected storylines, and it still can work like that. But I also think the beauty of being able to develop and expand these storylines and these character development is the fact that you can have a beginning and a definitive ending in an Elseworld, whereas in the main continuity, there is no ending. There can't be any ending. They just have to keep going. Every great story has an ending eventually. It doesn't have to necessarily be the end of a world. It just has to be the end of these characters you follow at some point. Elseworlds simply feels fresh, and to me, it feels more interesting. More interesting choices get involved as well. You get to see things that you haven't seen before. I finally got around to reading the entire series of Batman White Knight, and why I like that story so much is because, yeah, in all fairness, it's not perfect, but you get to see a version of Batman who is much more closely connected to, say, Harley Quinn and even the Joker. The Joker is not just your classic clown with an erased history and he is just chaotic to be chaotic. They changed the Joker in ways to have more of a personality and more of an understanding. Even simple things as changing Batman's costume in that storyline, and the fact that Jason Todd was the first Robin, Dick Grayson was the second. You know this is the Bat family, you know that's Batman, but they do things slightly differently that makes you know, yeah, this is not any ordinary Batman. He's a little bit different. I mean, we always think Batman has to be with Catwoman and Talia al Ghul. Well, why? Why not change it so that now he's with Harley Quinn? Now he has this secret love affair with Harley Quinn that even she feels for him as well. And I think what has simply happened over time, and the reason why I wanted to make this video, I have started to care less and less about main continuity and more about storytelling. I want original ideas, and I feel like full-fledged originality does happen to come more so from Elseworlds than it does the main continuity. I think the main continuity can be really good for younger fans who try to get involved into DC Comics. It can be a little more simple to understand these characters one-on-one and what the original idea of these characters were supposed to be. I also don't like to put too much focus on the main continuity when I try to make my own original stories about these characters. DC Comics likes to reboot every couple of years anyways, don't forget that. As long as I can recognize who these characters are and you give me a thought-compelling, original, creative story, I am going to take Elseworlds over the continuity any day. So that's my opinion, guys, and that's how I see the differences, the pros and cons of why I prefer Elseworlds over the main continuity. I'm sure I'm gonna get some hate for this, but you know, it is what it is. So you guys let me know how you personally feel, if you prefer the main continuity or if you prefer Elseworlds when it comes to reading comic books and any other media you intake. That is all I have for you on this one, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.